Morning everybody. We're just beginning to see the first of our staff return to work in the laboratories under very strict new protocols of how to behave, and I thought it would be a useful time to remind us all that when we look forward to beginning to return to work, we too will need to follow some very strict guidelines. And I know that sometimes it can seem a bit over the top when we're told where to stand or how to sneeze or whatever. So I thought actually Bill Bailey has a very useful story to remind us how important it is to think about what we're doing. So 3 men walked into a bar. Well, I say 3 men, but actually there were only 2 men because the third guy hadn't turned up. So the 2 guys stood outside the bar, shivering in the cold, and then said, "Oh, let's wait inside." They walked in, went up to the barman and said, "Could we maybe have a cup of tea or something? We're trying to do a 3 men walked into a bar routine, but the third guy hasn't turned up." And the barman said, "Oh, no problem," goes to get them a cup of tea. And as they sit at the bar stools, a woman comes over, a very large woman, heavily made up, and she says, "Excuse me, boys," she says, "I couldn't help but overhear what you were saying to the barman, and I wondered if I could help." And the first man says, "Well, that's very kind of you," he says, "but, it's a 3 men walked into a bar routine, and, well, you're a woman." And so she sort of looks a bit sheepish, and she says, actually, she says, "I'm a guy. I just like to wear women's clothing. Lets me do all of those kind of risque routines, but, I'm sure I could help." And the first guy says, "Oh, what could be wrong with that? That's awesome," he says. "Let's get started." So they all go out of the bar, and 3 men walk into the bar. Well, I say 3 men, but it was 2 men and a woman, but actually the woman was a man in woman's clothing, so technically it's all okay. So they walk up to the bar, but before they can even say anything, the door crashes open behind them. In comes a guy, and he's gasping for breath and panting. "Sorry I'm late," he says. "I was doing this shaggy dog routine with another guy, and he was really milking it. I couldn't get away. Anyway, I'm here now, so we can get started." And the first guy says, "Mate, we've already started. Sit down. Shut up. You're interrupting." And he says, "But you can't do the joke without me," he says. "It's a 3 men walked into a bar joke, and, well, there's only 2 of you. Anyway, who's this woman?" And the first guy says, "It's not a woman. This is a man dressed as a woman. So the joke has started. You're interrupting. Go away." And the third guy says, "So are you telling me that I'm out of this joke? A joke we've been doing together for 20 years. And it's just, that's it? You're out? No gold watch? Nothing?" And the first guy says, "No, you've been late far too many times. Sit down over there. Shut up." So that guy walks over and sits down looking a bit shocked, really. First guy takes a deep breath and he says, "Now, barman." But the guy at the table shouts out, "Heard it!" And the first guy is ropeable, and he says, "Of course you've heard it," he says. "You were doing the joke with us for 20 years. But the third guy the original third guy over at the table says, "I've had it," he says. "That's it." And he leaps to his feet, and out of his coat he pulls a giant kind of ray gun, and he says, "I am hijacking this joke and taking it on a surrealist rampage." And the first man says, "Mate," he says, "you don't know what you're doing. You can't hijack a joke and take it to a place where it's already gone. That's Gibbs' paradox." But even as he's talking, his face begins to melt and his voice drifts away into a hanging cadence. So let that be a useful reminder to you to be very careful before you say or do anything.